Good morning. I'm Red Feather Free, the Dragon Shaman. Thank you very much for tuning into my channel. Thank you for all my subscribers, all my friends on Google Plus, and all my followers. I appreciate every single thumbs up, every plus, every like, every comment, every share, everything. And I must personally say that I find what's occurring on Google Plus right now to be really a phenomenal thing. I see some of the most enlightened people that I've ever come into contact with congealing into around me and around each other. And I don't want to say that it's around me, but I see them in Google Plus. And I have some of the most enlightened people that I've ever encountered as my friends. So I'm very honored to have you as friends, and I thank you very, very much. Now, today's video is going to be about the psychology of the collective unconscious and Carl Gustav Jung's psychoanalysis. He published the book, The Psychology of the Collective Unconscious, or the Unconscious, and it laid the foundations for his school of psychoanalysis, also known as the Zurich School. He differed from his predecessor and his mentor, Freud, also known as the Vienna School of Psychology, because Freud based everything in complexes, if you will, that were rooted in the childhood sexuality and the child's connection with their parents growing up and developing during this phase of their lives. Jung, on the other hand, he says that people's neuroses, their current problems, may have influences from the past, but they're inevitably due to the present, the now, because our unconscious self has our true desires, and when our conscious self is acting and living and being in a way that is incongruous to what our unconscious truly desires, neurosis manifests. And this manifests in a myriad of different forms, from anxiety to anger to sadness to depression, to eccentricity, to madness. But that begs to the question, even so-called normal people suffer from these in some degree or another. So what is a neurotic except for a normal person that's gone a little more off of the balance than normal people? They can be returned right to balance. I believe that there's no fixed neurosis, or there's no neurosis which cannot be fixed and set right. And this takes a true analysis of the self. And see, Jung used a technique that he developed called psychoanalysis through things like free association and counseling, and being able to allow the unconscious to bubble up and then glean its true desires from that and match those up. We'll lay them, side by side with the actual life that the person's living, and then their desire life. And if they're not matched, there's probably going to be some sort of internal conflict, and it's manifested as anxiety or anger or something like that. Because what Jung has done, he's brilliantly encapsulated and turned it into a scientific method, which I admire very much, and I follow and I practice myself. A scientific method in order to break down and dissolve the ego. The ancients knew this. They knew these techniques, the ancient shamans, the ancient alchemists. And in fact, Carl Gustav Jung's final book that he published when I believe he's 88 years old, it was his crowning achievement. It's called Mysterium Jungi, and it deals specifically with alchemy and the Jungi, or the sacred marriage, the sacred union. The book, however, that he wrote to lay the foundation for psychoanalysis is The Psychology of the Unconscious. And in that, he deals with how myths are our society or humanity's way of expressing the desires of the collective unconscious. Now, to explain to you what the collective unconscious is, Dr. C.W. Hall, I believe, describes the human mind as like an iceberg, where only 1/8 of the iceberg is sticking out above the water that you can see. That's the conscious mind. That's what you perceive. However, there's a whole nother piece of the iceberg that's underneath the water that you can't see. It's still there. You know, in fact, 7/8 of the iceberg is hidden from the observer. This is the way the human mind works. We have a vast, vast, vast pool of consciousness to which we don't and aren't able to access in the waking or the ego conscious state. And through his method of psychoanalysis, free association, comparison, he's able to get to the root of these issues and show individuals what's causing their neurosis and actually help them realign their life path to get in tune with true self. Now, as the Buddha in the past has said, there's no one path, there's just the path. And Jung is taking a path that's parallel to other paths. The ancients have had a system very similar to this for time eternal. The tarot deck is an encapsulation of this method of psychoanalysis that has been handed down since the earliest times. Literally, it's the summation of universal knowledge. I suggest picking up the deck, if you're interested in tarot cards, the Book of Thoth by Aleister Crowley. And make sure that you get the book that he wrote, the Book of Thoth, to accompany it, because it is truly packed with profound insight, knowledge, and synchronicity. Being able to see all the world's systems for what they really are. Different versions of the same thing, of the same goal. Now, Carl Gustav Jung would express this as the libido. Our libido is what drives us. It's our force. Now, the ancients called that the ka. It's at its most basic, fundamental level, you could consider it to be the serpent of fire, the kundalini energy in yoga. It's that passion that drives you. It's the thing that creates fire. And in fact, in the runes, the need fire rune symbolizes two sticks rubbing together to create fire, is a symbol of the sexual union, of the Chritianity, the marriage. Now, inside each person is that collective unconscious, and Jung describes it as the mother. He describes it as two mothers. There's a fierce mother, a wild mother, and a tame, benevolent, giving maiden. And the Egyptians, in their mythology, they described this as Sekhmet was the wild, untamed beast that in mythology we're told Thoth, the scribe, went out into the wildlands and tamed her. And you know how he did that? By patience, by psychoanalysis, by showing her her wild ways could be tamed. And he brought her back into civilization, and she became Hathor, the great goddess of inebriation and joy and love. She represents the fulfillment, the shamanistic fulfillment, the conquering of the ego. Carl Gustav Jung also looks at all the myth cycles, the horse and the rider. The horse is our vehicle, it's the libido. I see, from my perspective, the libido also to be the force, the raw, the radiation, or the air, the spirit, the logos, as it's talked about in the Bible, the spirit. Or in Socrates, if you want to go into Platonism, Socrates in the works of Aristophanes and Clouds, he describes what he views the deity to be, that it's the clouds, it's air, it's the swirling motion, it's that spiral energy, and that spiral energy is the same energy or force that is the Ka, or the Kundalini fire serpent. It's all one and the same, it's just being represented or manifested in a myriad of different ways. Now, me personally, before I ever even got into Carl Gustav Jung, in earnest, that is, I started studying occult philosophy, and my journey honestly began randomly one day when I walked in an antique bookstore. My true journey, that is. Walked into an antique bookstore and I was walking around, and I went to the very back corner, dark shelf. It's kind of dank and dusty in there. right off of South Congress here in Austin, Texas, and I just found this book on the shelf, and it said Biblical Archaeology. And I had just taken an archaeology course at the University of Texas at Austin, and I got like a 99% in the class, and I still felt like it was totally dumbed down. Like they weren't talking about anything real from the past, and it kind of upset me. So I was going to try and learn more on my own. And I've always been really passionate about the pursuit of wisdom, philosophy. This book, Biblical Archaeology, was published in like 1955. I took it home and I read it. I poured through it. It was really an amazing book, and it corroborated how the biblical stories are based, you can find archaeological evidence to support them. However, I will add one caveat, that the book was published by Rothschild's revisionists, so the way that they cast the ancient Essenes and the Zealots and things like that is completely and totally wrong. They're trying to actually paint the picture that the Pharisees, the modern day people that think they can just write the laws and everyone else has to follow, were right. Not at all. Jesus the Christ was an Essene. He wasn't a zealot like the Pharisees who are today, that will readily kill you if you don't follow along with what their dogma is. Jesus was a free spirit. And that's one of the sad things that's happened. If you read Friedrich Nietzsche's The Antichrist, ooh, the Antichrist. Yeah, right? He's actually talking about the church and dogma. That's the Antichrist. As soon as Christ died on the cross, he died for his own sins, by the way. Christ is not a scapegoat. He's not Azazel. We've all been made to be Azazel, though. Christ and anyone else has been used as a scapegoat in life. I know I have plenty of times in my life been made the scapegoat, Azazel. And you know what Azazel was? Once a year on the Day of Atonement, the Jewish people would sacrifice one lamb, one burnt offering to the Lord Yahweh in the temple, and then they would tie a red ribbon around the neck of the other beautiful, perfect, innocent goat, and he would be led out into the wilderness and cast out. And that as he was cast out, the sins of the people, the burden of their sins for the last year, were cast out as well. And that's exactly what happened with Jesus Christ and the whole dogma of Catholic Christian dogma, is that he died for our sins. Absolutely not. Christ died for his own sins. He died for himself. He died as an example, just like Socrates died for his own sins. But they're not sins in the capital S sense. They're sins in the little sense, sins in this worldly sense, from the Pharisaical point of view. Take Socrates, for instance. He was accused of corrupting the youth, teaching atheism, and things like that. And he went to trial for it. And he stood up and he gave a beautiful and an eloquent defense speech. But in his defense speech, he didn't deny any of the charges. In fact, he pretty much labeled himself as being guilty of these charges. But the whole purpose of that, of him going willingly into death, was to show the whole point, that death has nothing to hold over us, and that this life is not what there is, that we are eternal spiritual beings. He had no fear. Jesus was the same way. They're trying to live by example to show us not to fear the dogmatic control of other men, the Pharisees and the Sadducees that want to try and control your mind and dominate you. No, be a free thinker. Question things. Socrates brought us science, the true science, not what it's become in modern day, its modern day expression. Modern day science is just as dogmatic as the Catholic Church. It truly is. And I have debates all the time with quote-unquote conservative Christians and so-called modern atheistic scientific determinists, and I find them both to be equally abhorrible in my mind. They're both equally dogmatic, equally condemning, and equally closed-minded. And they don't allow freedom of thought, freedom of expression, only within their bounds of what the concept is. As individuals, it's up to us to take the power into our own hands. And to get back to the Nag Hammadi text, it gave me the power in my hands. It told me, not the Nag Hammadi text, the book of biblical archaeology informed me of a little thing called the Nag Hammadi texts, which, if you haven't heard of them, there was, I believe it was a goat farmer, a herder, a pastoralist, outside of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, who was out one day, and he made a discovery of some canopic jars. And inside these jars were some leather-bound satchels or cases. And inside these were all sorts of texts. This man took these home, and that night, his mother or his wife, I'm not sure which one, actually used some of these texts for fire source, like firewood. Long story short, somehow or another, somebody recognized that they might actually have some value. And they made their way into the right hand somehow or another. And today we know them as the Gnostic Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, which is very influential on me. And what it's done is to show that what the Catholic Church attempted to do with Bishop Athanasius in the 4th century to, quote, eradicate the heretics was only semi-successful. That those heretics, we call them the Gnostics, the people that carried the true knowledge, the brothers of the desert, that they managed to keep some of their texts from being burned and destroyed. They managed to survive the ages and come back to us so that the truth could be known once again. That's what's happening all around us in the world. Their old dogmatic control structures built off of lies and incongruent thinking and illogical falsehoods are being exposed for what they are by people all over the world today. It's kind of like psychoanalysis of the collective consciousness of humanity. And you can see this manifesting because a large portion of humanity is regressing back to their immature, anger, childlike ways, but a good portion of humanity too, I see, is elevating and conquering that wild beast, or the wild woman, and achieving a union with the maiden. This is the whole purpose of the shamanistic journey, in my opinion. For me, I shamanize with the Amanita muscaria mushroom. It's called the Vajram, the lightning bolt. There's many ways to enlightenment or to nirvana. You know, the big wheel, the little wheel, Mahayana or the Suhayana in Buddhism. But some people are capable of using Zeus's lightning bolt to slay the beast. Or in another mythological story, you have Thor that uses his hammer to slay the Midgard serpent. This is the same story. We have a dragon in a cave that's guarding a treasure, and the brave man has to go inside and slay the dragon to get the treasure. And ultimately, the hero realizes that he himself is a serpent or a dragon, and that the entire process is self-created, also known as an Ouroboros. Hence the word in the Bible, I am. We are all one. This is not just euphemism, it's real. We are, meaning the entire one, just one consciousness, expressing itself subjectively in an infinite number of ways, so that it can gain and grow itself. It's truly philosophy, is what it is. Our living existence is philosophy. It's the pursuit of wisdom. Life itself is philosophy. Hence, that's why philosophy itself is such a beautiful system when it's understood correctly. It's based off of nature. But modern philosophy, and I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and I've got a degree in political philosophy, and I can tell you that the professors don't know their asshole from their elbow when it comes to philosophy. I had a professor teaching me about Friedrich Nietzsche and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and she'd never heard of Hermeticism. She'd never heard of Gnosticism. She didn't know that Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Emile was actually a Gnostic text about philosophy and the education of man. She didn't know that Thus Spake Zarathustra was a Gnostic text about the alchemical transformation of man and about the spiritual fire, you know. And when Nietzsche said God is dead, he was referring to the dogmatic control structures like the people from the pulpit. You know, what's the difference between a university and a church? They're both teaching dogma that you can't question, and if you do, you get shunned. You know how I got shunned when I started questioning their dogmas? Started making less than A's, started making B's and C's. Yeah, imagine that. Imagine that. Me getting a C in philosophy. Can you fucking imagine that? Excuse my French, but it's happened. You know why? Because I refused to jump through their hoop. I took a stand. In fact, I almost didn't even make it through the whole thing because I realized it's all just a giant sham. But I put 5 years of my life into it, so I decided I might as well get the little piece of paper. So, you know, one of these days I might be able to wipe my butt with it if I need to. or maybe start a fire. You never know, it could come in handy, but that's about all I know it's good for. So, back to the purpose of the video. Psychoanalysis, Carl Gustav Jung. Carl Gustav Jung talks about all of this. He's a great syncretist, and he follows in the path of the old Gnostics, and in fact, the alchemists were what inspired Jung. He studied all the mythologies as intensely as he could to try and glean the single thread running through Ender's web that connects everything. And he was able to do this so beautifully. So beautifully. But he did not finish the work, and he says this himself. He left it open for the future. And not to be prideful or boastful, but I truly feel like people like myself and others are the ones who are carrying that torch forward for it to be developed further, to truly liberate ourselves, to not depend on a psychoanalyst to go to or what have you, to be each other's helpers and teachers, to be all and each an alchemist or a psychoanalysis of the self, or a Buddha, you know? And a Buddha, to become Buddha, is not something that you work towards and then you suddenly achieve. In actuality, the work is Buddhahood. It's not the destination, but the journey that makes us who we are. Now, this video has kind of gone, you know, all over, back and forth and up and down and all around, encompassing 360 degrees. A sphere, you know, all encompassing is the true worldview that we should go after, we should strive for, because as soon as we allow for division into our thought processes, we've already become corrupted. Now let me go ahead and tell you how Christianity, modern Christianity, became corrupted almost as soon as Jesus died on the cross. His gospel, his living testament, became corrupted almost immediately because he lived the testament. That is the testament. It's living, it's being, doing, acting. That's the gospel. We have Paul come along, who was Saul. He was a Jewish Pharisee, for one, that prosecuted Christians for the longest time, and then he was a Roman citizen. Now, Paul's works are pretty profound, but they're also very, very subversive in a very advanced way. For instance, Paul gives us the command to hate evil. And I'm sorry, but that's a violation of the command of the law that Jesus gave us, or that Christ gave us, that love is the only law. You know, Christ came to say that all these old dogmas that people thought they could follow in the Jewish tradition and save them, you know, sacrificing the goat or the scapegoat would relieve them of their sins. Christ taught, no. You have to be responsible for your own actions, each and every individual. It's not, you know, some savior is going to come and absolve all humanity for their sin, and all you got to do is say, I believe in you, Jesus, and everything you ever did was gone. No, you've got to take responsibility for each and every sin that you've committed in life and take it. Take the brunt of it, whatever it may be, you know. And furthermore, what I was saying earlier to do with Socrates and Jesus, they both intentionally walked to their death knowingly that what was going to happen to them, but they did it gladly because they were going to return to what it is they already had seen once in their lives anyways. Socrates tells us about this in the allegory of the cave, that once someone's drug out into the light and they see the truth for what it is, they actually have to go back down into the cave because they realize all is one. In Buddha, it's called a bodhisattva. And they know that when they go back down into the cave filled with the other troglodytes, that they're probably going to get torn to pieces when they start telling all these troglodytes in the cave that what they're seeing and perceiving as reality is actually false. And the best way for me to describe this to you is that everything that you see, hear, taste, touch, smell, all your five senses are false. They're illusions. Because it's all coming in through this vehicle that we call our temple, and then it's going and it's being translated through biochemistry into chemical signals that are then interpreted by our mind's eye, by our thought, by our higher self, our consciousness, because as Hermes Trismegistus said, all is mind. He wrote that in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And it is proven that consciousness, or energy, as I call it, you can call it ka, the libido, it's one and the same. Truly it is. I believe it's one and the same. And it's when you get this realization that we are this spirit, this force, and that we're not just this matter or this flesh, that you don't have to allow yourself to be bound by the moralities and the dogma of other people's projections due to their own inability to confront themselves for the acts that they've committed that they would judge as wrong or sinful in their own heart of hearts. That's the thing. You have to give yourself morality. You know, God, the supreme architect, if you will, that we're all part of, we're all one with, he has an imprint inside us. As Descartes so eloquently stated in his theories, it's the idea that he leaves inside us that's there. In Pinocchio has Jiminy Cricket telling him right from wrong. We've all got a conscience, you know, we've all got an angel and a devil on our shoulder, and it's which one do you choose to listen to? But you know in your heart of hearts and in your soul that when you listen to that devil and you do what it tells you to, that you are harming yourself in some way or another. That what you're doing is somehow not right. It doesn't feel right for a reason. And it's when you begin to live in totally alignment with this one, with the angel, or as Socrates swore by him, the dog, and the dog referencing Anubis, but also Thoth, because Socrates tells us dogs are the truest philosophers. They accept what they know and they reject what they don't until they can come to understand it. Swore by Thoth, the spirit, and Thoth is thought, or the word, the logos. And what is Christ? We're told in John chapter 1, he's the word. He's been here before there was creation. He was with God when it was only God. And when God spoke, the vibration of the word created creation. And if you look on a giant macroscopic scale of the entire universe, which has been remarkably mapped recently. In fact, September the 4th, 2014, our local supercluster was renamed. It's now the Laniakea supercluster, which means great heavens. And we're way out on the far stretches of that. But if you look at the way the cosmos breaks itself down, all the stars are flowing along what you could consider to be chi lines or energy lines towards something known as the Great Attractor. But there are these superclusters that we're part of, but then there are these voids. And in the void space is where the true vibration is occurring. Where our superclusters are, the vibration is not occurring. Those are lines in between vibration. There's a science known as semantics, where you take a metal plate and put sand on it. You take a violin string, or a bow rather, of a violin, and you make a note. Well, that note corresponds to an actual geometric pattern. The sand will realign itself, and there will be voids and superclusters. So, in essence, all is just the word. It's just vibration. It's energy, or matter condensed into a slow vibration is what the superclusters become. They become pressed and condensed into slower vibrations and then form gross material. I thank you so much for tuning into this video. I've been just trying to speak from the heart as best as I can to give you as much information, synchronicity, as I can from my perspective. And I pray that it's helping you, and that you'll be able to find some of the strings that I'm dangling in front of you as leads that you can start pulling it. You know, maybe you'll take these strings and you'll start pulling them, and you'll be able to weave them into a rope, and you'll have a sturdy rope that you can climb higher and higher and higher and ascend out of the darkness of the cave. Because that's my purpose in life, is to help. I don't want to use the word help, but to lead an example for how others can get out of the cave. And I know full well that this may lead me into the same situation that Jesus or Socrates was in, where one day I might have to stand trial before false laws, and I'll stand up for myself, and I will profess guilt, you know, but not in that way. I'll be guilty of breaking man's laws all day long because I refuse to break the Lord's law. That's the truth. Don't worry about these governments, these control structures. That's what they want, to keep you under their thumb with fear and ignorance. As soon as you start questioning authority and thinking for yourself, in the immortal words of Timothy Leary, then you can open your mind to the possibilities and to your true self and to your true purpose. And then you can begin manifesting your bliss, your happiness. This is the way. It's the Tao of Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. It's Zen Buddhism, it's Christianity. It's the way of alchemy, the pursuit of the philosopher's stone. It's all the same. And to use art, since art imitates life, or life imitates art reciprocally, George Lucas in Star Wars is a great example of this, with the way of the Jedi and the Force. It comes with knowing yourself and through meditation, truly. Because how else are you going to figure out what it is that is really causing you to act the way that you're acting in the world, and really causing your issues and your perceived problems, unless you take the time to inventory every possible thing that you have that has happened to you, that could have happened to you, literally, just a free association. That's what psychoanalysis is. It's just a form of meditation, but you're having somebody else take collection or dictation of your thoughts and then read it back to you. You can do this yourself through meditation and practice. That's the thing. By practicing, you unlock your Buddhahood. You become Buddha simply through the practice. Descartes himself came to all his realizations through the process of meditation. He spent time alone. That's another thing. You've got to go away. So there's a period of introversion that's necessary before you can become yourself. You've got to kind of turn inward before you can fully know who you are, and then turn back outward and become a full living person. So at one point in Descartes' life, Rene Descartes, he had to spend several weeks basically locked in a cabin, and it was just him and a candle and his thoughts. And he recognized that there was no problem too great for his mind to tackle, because everything could be broken down into a smaller constituent and a smaller constituent and a smaller constituent, till eventually everything was as simple as 1 + 1. This is the truth. This is the way. Now, I've given it to you, given you a lot. I thank you. You know, it is what it is. Take it or leave it. I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. I love you all. I ask that you share this video and keep me in your heart as I keep you all in my heart. I thank you very much. Bless you.